Hey guys, welcome to the Dreadcutter podcast.
If you want to know how to blast your opponent down to zero authority, come check us out.
Woo!
Woo!
Alrighty, we're going to talk about Dec Archetypes now. Basically, the styles of decks that people tend to create as they're playing Star Realms. And I think this is something that helps you to have a plan for your deck. This is going to help you sort of figure out, like, what deck am I building, and how do I build towards that, and how do I do that efficiently and effectively. So, first archetype, and it's one that we harp on a lot here on the Dreadcutter podcast, is just aggro. Get damage, get scrap, shoot him in the face. Mostly greens with a little bit of red. That's your typical aggro deck. Some yellows if you want some card draw, but for the most part, you're focusing on red and green. Screw healing, screw bases, kill him before he kills you. Aggro deck.
And I would say that, green and yellow can be interchanged, because mostly, but I would say, like, if I were to choose between green and yellow in terms of an aggro, I would definitely choose green first. As much as I love and I cherish yellow, but there's a certain place for yellow, and that's like it's always going to be green first, yellow second, although they're very similar in their damage
in terms of damage.
In terms of just pure damage aggro, like you want cards that a little bit of red and then green, and then you want to have draws, so that just makes it like this, boom 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 boom. It's like your machine gun basically.
And this is why cards like Predator and cards like Burrower are so strong. 4 or 5 damage and ally to card draw. You get these two cards together, 9 damage, 2 card draws, freaking fantastic. This is how you aggro your opponent out. And very often, I will buy a Predator over an Explorer. I will buy a Predator over a trade bot. I'll buy a Burrower over a supply bot, because those take some time to kill your opponent, whereas these just freaking kill them now. I'd almost rather take that damage and that card draw over the efficiency that scrappers will eventually create when I could just have it now.
Yeah, exactly. So some of the
There's my mama.
Moon Warrior's a mama,
Where's my mama?
Take care of the children,
Take care of your kids.
Watch your kids. Take care of your kids and watch your kids, like blobbing. You just gotta blob. Like, if you're thinking that, you just gotta be put in your head blobbing. I'm blobbing and blobbing and blobbing,
That's what I'm doing.
Blobbing and plopping.
Yep. And I would also say you could sprinkle in some yellows. Again, this is why a card like Imperial Smuggler is so good.
It's a great,
It gives you cycle.
It's a great cycler, like yellow is known for cycling, really, really, really fast, and so that's why it's a great complement to a damage deck.
Mm-hmm.
Especially
so deck archetype number 2 is what's called a cycle aggro deck. So while it is mostly about damage, it's also about having cards that draw your deck really quickly. Not necessarily focusing on scrap per se. It's more about getting
damage
cards that draw into your efficient damage, right? And this is where typically this is a green-yellow deck.
Yeah.
And has cards like Imperial Smuggler, has cards like the Lancer in it, has cards like Orbital Platform, which is another good card, right? Allies yellow, deals 4 damage, discard a card, draw a card. So it has a lot of these card draw cards in it, a lot of weightless cards that deal damage and, shoot your opponent in the face.
Yeah.
But it's less focused on getting the most out of every individual card, and is more focused on draw, shoot.
I mean, there are 2 types of aggro, right? There's an aggro scrap and there's an aggro draw, And so, cycling your damage, trying to keep your deck at its 10 weighted card slot as much as possible, That's how you're going to draw your damage, efficiently. Because if you keep it to that 10, then you're just cycling twice and then drawing all your cards again, And so that's just as good as a scrapper where it takes a little time. But actually, that might be the more efficient one, actually, is the cycle aggro, because it doesn't take time. It just keeps them going really fast initially, you know?
Yeah.
This cycle, yeah.
Really, the only drawback to it is it could become inefficient eventually. So if you don't kill your opponent, it's very likely your opponent will come back and beat you.
Yeah, and that's why it's important that if you see you find yourself in that situation, that you keep on getting damage cards. Just think, I'm gonna grab this, you know, all these 5-cost, you know, damage cards, you know, battle mechs, you know, and what is it, War Worlds and whatever, you know, Lancers,
Lancer,
all that
War
stuff.
Worlds, yeah, right. Like even though War World is the base, it's really efficient damage. It's 7 damage. Imperial Frigate, really good card, right?
Amazing.
4 damage
My favorite
initially,
engine.
combos for 3, potentially heals for 5 too. Like 12-point swings and a 3-cost card. Like that card's fantastic.
Yeah. So yeah, what's the next archetype after that?
So the next Dec Archetype. So we've got 2 different styles of aggro deck.
Yeah.
You know, the next deck is going to be a trade focused deck. So this is what I like to call big money, big bombs deck.
Yeah.
So what this does is it focuses on getting really efficient trade cards early to then buy 7 and 8 cost cards to then use those cards to win the game.
I got it right. It's more money, more problems.
More money, more problems for your opponent.
We'll just play that.
More money, more money.
You know, more money, more problems. Like that. That's one of my favorite songs.
The more money we come across, the
Notorious
more
B.I.G., I think, right?
I'm coming out. I want the world to know. Got to let it show.
Gonna blast you with blob.
Yeah. So it's a very flashy. It's kind of a flashy style of deck. You know, it does big things. It gets big, massive cards.
Very eclectic cards, yes.
Yeah. It's not really too dependent on synergy, whereas cards like the aggro deck and the cycle aggro deck very much want to synergize. It's not so important that you synergize. It's more about like get the massive 6, get the massive 7, get the massive 8, and ride those cards to victory.
Yeah, and so like you know, there was a game that I played very specifically, I think in year 2 of when we played like a long time ago when I was in undergrad college. Like I remember there was a day that we were in the library, and there was one time where I just picked up 6 blues. I was just like, I'm not gonna get any efficient trade. I'm not gonna get any scrap or any draws. I'm just gonna pick up all the blues. Like, and you're like, how's Pat gonna win this game? Like, he has no scrap. You remember this?
Yeah, and like I bought a bunch of scrap.
He has no scrap, no draws. He does all this blue and all this healing. Like, how is he gonna win? Well,
he's not gonna win. Yeah, it's silly.
He's gonna win. It's all right. I mean, like I'm gonna out damage him eventually, and it's gonna be like that. And then next thing you know, I'm picking up Brain World. I'm picking up like Construction Hauler. I'm picking up like all these different like 8 drops, and then next thing you know, my deck actually returns to its efficiency. You know, like it just comes, like goes like this, and then it retracts, and then it comes back.
Yeah,
like, all in one, like two cycles. Like it comes back.
You went from like a weighted number of like 22 to like 12 in like 2 turns.
Like
I was just like, oh shit!
Oh shit! Is he gonna win?
What happened?
And then next thing you know, I'm like at 82. You know, like how, and you're down to like 12 or something.
Yeah, it was like 40-6, and then I lost like 82-0. I'm just like, what the hell happened? You know, I was like 1 or 2 turns away from killing you, and then just and the whole.
And I just remember jumping up, and I went down the escalator, and went back up, and I was like, how did that happen? And we'll hear a lot about our stories about epiphanies we had with certain like moments in life because they were just so memorable. Like the first time that we won, like we're getting all reds.
Yeah.
Or the first time that we won getting all, or the first time that we got a 5-card discard.
You know, and so that's the thing with decks like that though. It's mostly early trade, and it's a lot of efficient healing, and then you use that to make the game go longer, right? So what does healing do? Healing effectively says you've got a percentage of a turn extra. You know, if like let's say you average about 7 damage a turn if you got a good deck, approximately. Well, if you heal for 7 damage, that's effectively another turn. And that's what healing does for you. It gives you more time. And so decks that have a lot of trade and a lot of healing, what they're saying is, I'm going to take more time with the game, but I'm also going to build a deck that's going to be insurmountable. I'm going to get all these really big cards, and then that's going to turn my disadvantage into an advantage. You flip the game. And that's what these decks typically do, is they flip.
Yeah, so you're going like this. You're going to, it's kind of like a warp speed. Like you're going somewhere, and then you're having experience, and then you come back. Like, you know, it's like you don't know if you're going to win or not. We don't really know, but then suddenly you gain all these amazing 7, 8, 6, 7, 8 drop cards, and suddenly you're able to like just come back as a more efficient, stronger, better deck than you've ever imagined. You know.
Yeah, you're taking a lot of hits on initial efficiency to become incredibly strong and incredibly efficient.
Yeah, and those are really oh my god moments coming because you didn't expect your opponent to come back because, well, when you have a command ship and you have the Ark and then you have like Capital Worlds or like some of the others like amazing 7s, 8s out there, that strikes fear into people's hearts because they know that that's like couple cycles later that bad boy is gonna hurt like an MF.
Yeah, and it's gonna change the complexion. It's gonna change the complexion of the game.
Yeah.
Okay, so another Dec archetype that's really good and is similar to the Mo Money, Mo Problems, Big Money, Big Bombs deck is the Big Money, Big Scrap deck.
Yeah, so that's just like a combination of like waiting for the aggro. A little bit of scrap. Anything that has a little bit of scrap in it, like, will make that archetype a lot more efficient. So that's what we're saying. And so we also have trade. We have trade draw also, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the same way.
Yep,
yeah.
Same idea.
Same idea.
So the initial decks that we talked about, the aggro deck and the cycle aggro deck, are about damage and then efficiency and damage. So this is about trade and then efficiency in trade.
Yeah.
Right. So either you're getting mostly blues with some reds to scrap your deck down, make it really efficient, and then you're buying 8-drop, 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 and heal, and then you're just drawing into your 8-drops, and that's how you kill them.
Yeah.
Or you have mostly blues with some yellow cards, and that draw. You draw into your big cards. You buy the big cards. You draw into your big cards. You know.
Yes.
So, basically what it is making your deck really efficient, getting rid of those shitty blues that you initially bought and keeping the really strong blues that heal and deal.
Yeah, so those are the two main, you know, like if you're thinking about what direction you want to go. Yeah, the trade or the aggro, you know, with the scrap or draw or both, you know, there's also one that has a balance, but you want to keep track of those two, like those archetypes, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then last archetype is the base strategy, base archetype.
Yeah.
Which is basically where you buy mostly bases, you play mostly defensive, and then you get a lot of value over time because it's hard for your opponent to kill all your bases. So then what ends up happening is you get what's called card advantage. Instead of just having 5 cards, you have 5 cards and 2 bases. It's like you have 7 cards. And so then what ends up happening is you have 7, your opponent has 5. You have 8, your opponent has 5. And eventually he gets grinded down to where he just has no value.
Yeah, and it's
You
most
just
important.
outvalue your opponent.
Most important for beginners to think about when they think about base strategy is that is one of the first things you should take a look at of what your opponent, like if you're talking about wanting to take a look at what your opponent's doing. Yeah, number one, how much scrap does he have in his deck? And then number 2, are they accruing bases, you know? Where it's like, if you don't have enough damage to kill your opponent's bases, then that actually creates a super advantage for your opponent, you know? So you have to make sure, like, if my opponent is buying 2 or 3 bases at the start, that I have enough damage to kill those bases, like, in my cycles. Otherwise, like, what you're going to do is end up giving your opponent extra effects for their bases being on the field, like you alluded to, like I have 6, 7, 8 cards. Well, if you have that over the course of 2 or 3 turns, that creates an insurmountable advantage that you won't be able to come back over. Even if your opponent is able to kill them later, you've already gotten all that value out of those cards. And so that's important for a beginner to take a look at, is really be mindful about how many bases your opponent is buying. And also use that to your advantage. If you have the ability to buy all these bases and then use that against your opponent, that is a viable strategy, you know, and one that shouldn't be overlooked. Yeah.
Agreed. And the thing about base strategy is it's slow, but if you can get it down, it is crushing. Like,
Yeah.
it's one of the few strategies that has no counter once it's in place. You know,
Yeah.
if you're all scrapped down, you can have a discard deck and that will counter a scrap down deck. Right? If you have a lot of trade, well, you can counter that with a lot of damage. If you have a lot of damage, you can counter that with a lot of healing. If you have a lot of bases, you're fucked. Your opponent is just fucked. Like, they can't do it. Like, the only way they can do it is to get way more damage. And then probably you've already healed up, defended up enough to where your life total is so high that you're just going to slowly kill them anyway. And you're just going to buy up damage cards until they die. And having a lot of bases gives you a lot of time. So then you get to a certain point where, like, okay, my base strategy is set. I'll just buy a few extra damage cards. He's dead. And there's literally nothing you can do.
Yeah, there's the bases create this very exponential efficiency, you know. Not only does it like give you multiple like effects for multiple turns, which is amazing, but it also creates an efficient deck, you know. So like whereas a bloated deck would have, that's why we say 0.5 for weighted, because sometimes it actually, you know, makes it doesn't even, it's not even part of your deck. If your opponent can't take down 2 or 3 bases, that's not your deck anymore, you know.
Yeah.
It's just something that's added to you. It's just you. It basically becomes you, you know, and then you're just like cycling through your cards. Yeah.
Right. If you have 3 bases live and you draw 5 cards, that's like you have 8 cards. Like, there's no way your opponent can come back from you having 3 turns of 8 cards versus him having 3 turns of 5 cards.
Yeah.
And so last deck archetype, your favorite archetype, discard deck.
Discard deck. Oh, my favorite.
All yellows all the time, baby.
And it's always been my.
I'm gonna defer to you. I'm gonna send the floor to you because I know
I need this time. I need this.
I'm an expert at all the other ones. This one, you are
this is
very much significantly the expert above me.
It is my duty and my absolute pleasure and privilege to really give you guys what I've discovered in my ultimate endless journey of trying to get my opponent to discard 5 cards, you know.
How does one do that, Pat?
And so like well, the first thing to look is actually look down in the deck and see if there's any yellow discard cards, you know. That's the first thing, you know. Well, there are 2 ways you can do this, and ultimately, it is the most ultimate satisfaction when you can get your opponent to 5 cards, because that's almost 99.9% your opponent is going to lose, like, you know. And so what I would say, there's 2 ways you can do it. Yeah, like number 1 is just accrue as many yellow cards as you can. Just get like all the discards, all the draws, because you're gonna, and then a little bit of scrap, you know, at least enough where like if the cycle is going good, then you're eventually going to get to that. So like what I say is a good number for scrap cards, 3 cards of scrap, because that's the magic number, because that gives you a nice balance between bloating your deck and actually getting your deck most efficient. I feel like it's the number that, you know, because if you get 4 or 5, like unless you have all the cards you need in your deck, that's actually going to be a detriment to you. If you get 1 or 2, that might be too slow, you know. So in order to build this deck, you're going to have a combination of both draws and scrap, and just enough scrap, and then as many yellows. I would say 6 or 7 discard cards in your deck to make this work. And that is the dream. That is the holy grail, like, you know, literally yellow golden like strategy of this whole game, you know. Like, I know you've experienced it too, Ryan, where you're able to discard 5. And it's like if to use Yu-Gi-Oh terms, it's like the Exodia of this
Exodia,
game.
it is. It's over.
You draw all 5 pieces of Exodia, it is over. Like you give such a disadvantage to their card draws, because they're basically giving up a turn. And in that game, that is huge, especially late game, you know. I just love it so much, and there's so many times where I would get like 3 or 4 discards, and I would be like, oh man, I need that 4th or 5th to complete the whole thing, but that is just overkill. But I love it. It's the reason what keeps me in Star Realms and keeps me playing, because I'm always trying to figure out ways to improve on that technology, that discard technology, you know.
Discard technology.
Yeah.
So what are some ways that you can make your deck, like, get that 5-card discard over and over and over again?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, number one is like you have to get 3 scrap cards in your deck. That's absolutely essential.
Okay.
You can't get the 5-card discard without a scrapper. Unless you find like so many draws that you will eventually, like, you get like some blobs that also draw into decks. Like Blob World is a great card that allows you to draw many cards. Just getting lots of, like, if you're gonna go to other colors, you have to have them be draws. They have to be weightless, basically. That's important. So because I think through the journey of your 5-card discard journey, if you all want to take that on, you're gonna encounter other colored cards. It's not gonna look perfect, in order for you to achieve this holy grail. Like, you have to grab cards, but what cards are in the field that will unlock all those other discards that come out is you actually have to buy cards on the deck. But the cards you buy on the deck have to be weightless, so that when those yellow cards come out, then you can just buy them. So that's another tip I would say, is not only the efficient 3-card scrappers, but you have to buy cards on the field that are not yellows, that make your deck either more efficient or more drawy. So those are the tips for me. It's really hard. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, this is similar to base strategy, where if you can pull it off, it's insurmountable.
Yeah.
But it's hard to pull off. Like, it's
very
not
hard
something you're going to try to do every game.
Yeah, it's not. But the thing is, an offshoot, a side effect of it is it actually does a lot of damage. So, like,
sometimes you just kill them.
Sometimes you just kill them before you, like. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm about to, like, have a yellow gasm, and I just, like, I just kill my opponent before we could have that moment experience together, because the 5-card discard orgasmic experience has to be felt by both people. Like, the pain of the 5-card discard has to be felt in every inch and vein of that other person.
Very
like,
BDSM-y.
And then I have to.
Well, one of the things that I was talking about earlier, like with the base strategy, the way you win is you have 8 cards to their 5.
Yeah.
With the discard strategy, it's your 5 cards with a bunch of card draws to their 2 cards, or 1 card, or if you're really lucky, 0 cards. So both strategies
wears down
they win. Yeah. So both strategies
like a boxer, you're wearing them down.
Yeah. You're sticking and moving. And so the way that both decks win is through what's called card advantage. You're not necessarily winning with damage. You're winning by the fact that you are getting more cards than your opponent. You have more cards than your opponent. And over time, you start building up a card advantage on them. You have 3 more cards than them every turn. After 3 turns, you have drawn 9 more cards than they have. You're going to win.
Yeah, because your opponent can't box you, It's kind of like Rocky versus Clubber Lang. He just allowed him to wear down until he was pudgy, and then he could just knock him out. Like, the same with this deck. Like, it allows you, the thing is, by taking away their trade, because you are taking away trade and other effects from them, is that they cannot buy the 7-8 cards, that will supposedly make their deck amazing, so that's another advantage of that. When you're talking about card advantage, it doesn't allow it strangles them in every facet,
Puts the handcuffs on them.
Puts the handcuffs on them,
Yeah.
So
very controlling.
Yellow.
Very controlling. If anybody out there plays Magic the Gathering, it you know what I'm talking about. You're controlling what your opponent can do. You're not giving them room to breathe. And because they have no room to breathe and they don't have any tools to work with, they can't win. They're just complete.
Guys, thank you so much for listening and watching the Dreadcutter podcast.
Thank you for scrapping your way through our podcast. We really appreciate you spending our time just chilling with our geekiness over here.
Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.